I wanted to welcome everybody back and thank you for joining our check-in, our reunion. And a lot has transpired since the last time we all got together. So, I think it was a really great idea on Genevieve's part to bring us back together to see how everybody is doing. One thing I know, if you haven't already seen it, I just have to say Genevieve had an amazing article in Vanity Fair come out. If you haven't seen it, you have to see it. Genevieve, what can I say? You just continue to amaze. I don't know what else to say. I'm pretty speechless. Congratulations.
Thank you, but
that sounded like a question, but thanks, Erin. So yeah, I just, I think we were gonna let it be pretty free form today. And, as we said, I think this was a check-in. I'm not going to direct this. I think we'll let it be fairly organic. As I said, I think the reason we all thought it would be great to come back together is because very shortly after we last talked, it was a really difficult farewell. And then to be quite blunt, a lot of stuff went down. And so we felt like it was important for us to come together and have a place to talk about it. So my first question, and whoever wants to start, I won't put Genevieve on the spot. How are we feeling? I think that's a fair question.
It is a fair question, and it might be really hard to answer. I'll just get the ball going and in a way to just say that it's been kind of a roller coaster of emotions. So to kind of just feel like one way, at least from my perspective, doesn't make sense, Yeah. It kind of ebbs and flows in terms of just like feeling really overwhelmed, saddened, angry, inspired, all of the things,
Yeah, I think that's a good start.
How about you?
I was going to say, poor Genevieve, and been subjected to my roller coaster emotions the past 2 weeks, and I hate to put them through it again and have all of you have to partake in that. But I think, like I said, I've described it more as I feel like I'm going through the different stages of grief on an hourly basis. Sometimes I'm in denial, sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm angry, I'm frustrated. Out of all of that, I think I'm most exhausted, but I'm not deterred.
Yeah. That's a good way
I just refuse. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that feeling of like not even doing much in the day and just still feeling exhausted. And that's part of the grieving kind of process, I think.
Yeah.
On top of that, taking everyone else on the journey, there's a lot of us that have to step up for folks to, explain, or I don't want to say dumb down, but it kind of feels like that if you're kind of in that mode of always kind of unpacking the issues around race. And so, or race and racism in America and really all over the world. So that has kind of, I don't know, that kind of explains maybe where that feeling of exhaustion comes from, because at least for me, I think I've even told you it's been a lot more difficult being out of LA during this time. I have a really diverse community of friends out in LA, and there's a lot of different perspectives that we can bounce ideas off each other and just thoughts. And although I'm in a place that I really love, I see that it doesn't have that ability to kind of support me, support my perspective, and my beliefs, and all of those things. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah, I think Genevieve and I could go back and forth, basically recapping all of our conversations, and I will end up in tears. I'm just going to tell you right now. I think that's a great way to describe it. One thing I want to add is I think that concept of exhaustion for particularly African Americans, but folks who are of color, is that it's kind of like it's analogous to when you lose a loved one, when somebody passes away. You expect the whole world to stop because it is that important to you, yet you have to keep going business as usual. And that takes a lot of energy. And I think that's been it. We cannot just stop, but yet we don't have time to really acknowledge it. And, you know, for some of us, it is very isolating depending on where you are or who you have to talk to about it. But it definitely, I think, feels that way. And I think that exhaustion is real, but it's hard to convey that to somebody that doesn't quite understand.
Totally.
I wonder, you know, I tried to come up with questions that didn't seem too demanding, and I'm just gonna, if people want to respond, great. I wondered, you know, through all of this, you know, I shared with folks that my sleeping patterns have changed. And maybe I am a little tired, but I'm wondering if anybody else, if there are things that have transpired that you just kind of, what keeps you up at night, if with regard to what's happened, you know, just kind of thoughts or reflections or comments that anybody, you know, because that's when I find myself most philosophical, when I'm laying in bed and like trying to, you know, fall asleep.
I'll jump in. So there isn't a lag in this, but something, it kind of ties in with what you were saying about the mourning process and that feeling really tiring and overwhelming. And there's something, you know, I instantly thought about when I lost my niece and how, you know, that's been like a really hard process, but the circumstances are totally different, and I don't have to see images of the circumstances every, you know, channel I turn on. And that kind of image of George Floyd having the knee on his neck is just that kind of rehashing image that I don't know how you can get it out of your mind in a way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, I have moments where I'm like tossing and turning, and you know, that will flash into my mind. It just like, it's a chain reaction of all the things, you know.
That's right. Did anybody else have a hard time? Did it take them a while to actually watch the video? Or did every...
So I've not watched the video, the full video at all, but it was only when I watched Dave Chappelle's like short stand-up the other day, and you know, was emphasizing about, you know, the 8 minutes and 43 seconds, where I really kind of like took the time to like really think about it and try and comprehend and just try and visualize, like, that's a long time. So yeah, I haven't watched the video yet. I don't think I will watch it. Obviously I've seen stills of it, but I think the first time when I really thought about the timing and just how unnecessary it was, like in terms of, you know, the officer, the amount of time he had he shouldn't have had his knee on his neck anyway, but I think, yeah, just the way Dave Chappelle kind of like spoke about it really made me think about, just that moment. And then, you know, you have him calling out for his mum, and, you know, and still this man, like, you know, there's just no mercy at all, no sympathy, nothing. You know, with regards to the suffering. So, but yeah, I think I'm kind of like done with watching videos now. I don't think I can watch them. I think one of the fears is that I've become desensitized to it, and it just becomes normal. but also it's kind of thinking about, you know, those around me. You know, I have a brother, you know, I don't, because, you know, when, you know, like going back to kind of like Ferguson and kind of like, well, if we go back to kind of like 2016, 2017, I remember, you know, when kind of like all of these stories were coming out, and me thinking about, oh gosh, I've got, you know, me thinking about my brother, like constantly, like this could be happening to him. I mean, I know here in the UK, it's, you know, it's a little bit different how it is in the States, but, you know, we still have these issues with police and racism. And so I didn't want to kind of like, I didn't want to keep having these thoughts. I didn't want to house these thoughts that, oh, this could happen to this person that I know, or that person that I know. So yeah, and I just didn't want to become desensitized to seeing these videos of people suffering as well. So yeah, yeah, I don't think I'll watch it.
No, it's a good, very good points that you've made.
Yeah, I think, and it's something I've expressed to Genevieve, is there's something about the image that you can't undo. Then there is a certain amount of guilt that I felt if I didn't watch it, like I didn't know, or I wouldn't be informed. But I don't know if it requires that to be informed. And then I think there's a certain amount of resentment, obviously, that, and I think in what you've just expressed, the idea of, to me, how unfair it is, the conversations that I have to have with my children about how they need to interact with law enforcement that other mothers don't. And that makes me exceptionally angry. But that's not something I'm going to share with everyone, you know, but that is just, it's a part of what is. And to be reminded with what goes on, there's a certain amount, again, of denial. Like, I don't want to have to worry about and think about that every day. I still have fairly young children, but at one point they go from being cute to being perceived as dangerous. You know, and we need to be honest and prepared for that. But that to me is exceptionally unfair. And so the images kind of continue that, but there is a certain concern that comes up continually when you see that over and over. Yeah,
Definitely. And I've had that conversation with a few moms, that this kind of, you know, younger kids, even younger than yours, this kind of feeling like, I don't really want to take my kid to the rally because they shouldn't have to be thinking about this, you know, and these are Black mothers with Black kids. And so it's like this age of innocence, you know, and it seems like it's getting us like smaller and smaller. And yeah, she was just this one particular friend of mine just grappling with that idea of like, you know, I want to be present and I want to be supportive and I want to stand up and, you know, voice my opinions against what's happening. But at the same time, I have a little girl at home and I just want her to think that she's amazing and beautiful and not have these other things coming at her that are going to alter that. As long as, you know, maybe it's only a few more weeks or a few more days, you know, but it's really, it saddens me to think that that's even something she has to worry about or think about, you know?
right.
And there's a lot of adults kind of in this mindset of, how am I going to teach my kids about racism and whatever? And it's like, it's not really your kid's problem. Like, it's your problem, you know? They're going to follow your lead. So all of these minute ways of being, even if they seem really like they're not having an effect on anyone, they really are. And so when I talk to like some of the younger kids, at least that I've been hanging around in town, I just kind of tell them this is more of our issue and the generations behind me too. I was telling you that this one, she's either 10 or 11. I live in a really tiny town. I think we looked up, there's like the population
800? Yeah.
100 and something, yeah. So we don't even have a traffic light, you know? So this one girl in town wanted to have, you know, a kids-led protest. And although on the scale of things it was really tiny, it was something that really moved me and just gave me that glimmer of hope that, again, like, I don't feel like it was really her. It shouldn't be her fight, but she was at least leading it and setting an example for the elders, you know?
Mhm.
It's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. I've had several conversations with parents who were all amazed at how resilient these children are, but how this is so matter of fact. Of course, you wouldn't treat someone like that. It's very much good guy versus bad guy. It's that simple. And it should be that simple, but it is so much more complicated. And that's the part that you don't want to have to help your children to understand. You want them to be able to be children first. So yeah.
But most white kids don't have to worry about that.
No.
Or consider that, you know?
Yeah. There was, I was listening to a podcast. I think it was, I think I was telling you about it, Genevieve. It's African-American women that do these hike. I think it's Black Girl Trek. It's a podcast that comes on. Yeah. And so they go all over and they hike together and, you know, because I don't know if you know, but you don't see a lot of Black folks at state parks. And it's just not, we have, you know, we are moving there in that direction, but that has historically not been what we do. Anyway, so they're about the outdoors, and this week they basically went through all these different female heroes and activists. Anyway, one story, they said they were on a hike and they were taking a group and they were somewhere up near a lake. And this big group of African-American women were walking together, and they come around this corner, and there's this white couple that has a Black daughter, and she's just like frolicking in the water and, you know, just having the best time. And all of these Black women were like aghast, because Black moms don't just let their children go and do that. It was like, but then they all voiced a certain like secret kind of like, they were envious. They were a little bit jealous that this little girl just had the freedom to do that. Like, she didn't, you know, care. And a lot of us don't do that with our children because we're not quite sure if it's going to be a safe space or all that sort of thing. Children, yeah, if they don't know what they don't know. So everything is okay. And when we have this, that is unfortunately lost for them. What are some things that people might want to share that is keeping them going? Like, you know, in the midst of all of this, has there been any silver linings or realizations or good things that you've seen that kind of have kept or encouraged or inspired anyone?
You know, I'll add that I think that one of the things that's inspired me is one of the things that makes me so angry, which is that there have been lots of demonstrations and rallies and protests, which is to me encouraging, because we're seeing challenges to our culture right now that should have happened decades ago. Now they're starting to come about, you know, from the way we're thinking about kind of the pedagogy that we use, content in courses, to what's on grocery store shelves and what images they project. And so all of these things are being brought into question, which is great. I mean, I think it almost, and I'm almost afraid to say this, but it seems like we're starting to see a collective consciousness emerge to say, we've all had enough. And so to a certain degree, that's what encourages me. What is frustrating and angering for me is that it's taken this long to get here. And that's coming from you know, white privileged male perspective. And I know that there are people in the Black and brown communities that have been saying, you know, this is how we've been feeling for decades. But that is what is frustrating, but also encouraging to me, that we're finally at a place where it feels to me like, you know, we're all starting to see through a common lens. We come to it through different ways, but we're seeing a common lens that says things really have to change. We can't go on like this. And I remember who it was that said this earlier about kind of the image of George Floyd, and for me, the image of Rayshard Brooks with George Floyd. What was most disturbing to me about that image was, there are many things, but what was most disturbing is how casual this police officer was kneeling on his neck. If you remember, his hand was in his pocket, like, this is just a walk in the park thing for him. And it was just so casual that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, he knelt on this man's neck and killed him with his hand in his pocket. And then with Rayshard Brooks, you know, they had his car, they had his license, they knew who he was, where he lived, and he ran off. Why not just let him run? And so these little subtle pieces of the images that I think if it weren't for someone who could have just said, you know, I'm going to change this, both of these men would be alive. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they're and somebody else had said they're trying to avoid the seeing the images, and I'm trying to do that, but in my head, it's that piece where with Brooks, they've got the license, they know who he is, and with Floyd, the hand is in the pocket, and I think these are horrible, horrible things, so a callousness related to the taking of someone's life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the frustrating, like, bigger picture is that, you know, you talk about this kind of people kind of all starting to see the thing, but nothing changes until white America sees the thing, believes it, changes. Like, so there's a whole heap of us waiting for everyone to catch up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, I got a text from a friend this morning, and she's like, I woke up to Netflix is giving $120 million to historically Black colleges. Aunt Jemima is coming off the shelves. I mean, just all these list of things. And I think a lot of this too, when we talk about this exhaustion, is I can say as a person of color, and unfortunately I'm old enough to have seen this happen and played out the exact same way, not quite with the fervor now of this collective consciousness, but the idea that people of color, especially Black and brown folks, have been at a place where to only just be deflated again. You know, that you see so many possibilities, and then you think this is gonna be it, only to see that it's, you know, there's a window, it could be superficial, we don't know how, but I think that's part of the exhaustion, that you want to be inspired, you want to be encouraged, but you're so afraid of being disappointed or let down that you become, you know, you become senseless. You don't quite want to, you don't want to believe what you're seeing because you're afraid of that. And I think that that's a lot of it too. Because yeah, I mean, I've never, I couldn't believe, it was a list of like 10 different things. And I thought, it's amazing. But we always have that fear that, and you know, I think everybody has a different perception. I see heads nodding, so I don't know if I'm expressing it clearly enough, or I'm saying, but you know, that you're afraid that it's not, I don't know, that it's not going to last. It's not really part of the systemic change, but it is part of change that has to happen. And you know, to your point, President Burge, I mean, we're looking at how many years we've been doing this. It will take us so long to move us forward that we have to celebrate some of the moments. We can't not. But we feel, I think at this point, we feel we have to be vigilant. And that's what I get at with the bravery part, to stay vigilant, because I'll be the first, you know, there are a lot of things that I haven't had to deal with, and I have a certain amount of guilt about that. There are certain things that I have, and I don't feel badly about it, but you need to, there's so much that you reconcile as a person of color that you know, you're not like all these different ways of seeing the world are all basically colored by what you've seen happen and what has happened again. And that it's just, it's a hard cycle, I think. And I feel like all of us want that so very badly. I don't feel like I made sense at all, did I?
You totally did.
Made
You
sense to me.
did.
Yeah, it made sense. I agree with you. I question how much of it is just performative, you know, like, well, here's the time to jump on the bandwagon and let's not lose our, you know, our black and brown dollars. And that's always scary and sad, you know, and that's a disappointment in and of itself. Like, I'd rather you just not do anything than do it because you feel like, oh, I'm going to go broke if I don't, or I'm going to lose a few million of my $1 billion, you know, if I don't. And I think I struggle with that a lot. And I have a son, so that's what keeps me up at night. Is like, what is this world that I've made, that I am, you know, brought this little boy into? Like, I'm scared for him. So.
Yeah, I remember Blackout Tuesday. I remember waking up in the morning and just scrolling through my Instagram feed, and I knew that this was happening. I knew that the pause thing was happening in the music industry, but I didn't realize how like everyone would get onto it. So I remember waking up, scrolling through my Instagram feed, and it was just black square after black square after black square, and it was nauseating, like, for me personally. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, even people that have been where I've been in situations where I've been the only black person and something's happened and no one's like stood up for me, no one's helped, people who were complicit in some way in, you know, stuff happening, they were posting these black squares and just these organizations, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, I was taken quite aback by it, and I remember thinking, okay, maybe people are starting to learn, maybe people are becoming more aware. Okay, people are speaking out again. I mean, okay, posting a black square doesn't mean that you're speaking out against racism, but like, I thought, okay, maybe they're onto something. They want to learn, they want to be allies or whatever. But then there was another part of me that was like, well, let's just see what happens. I didn't like any posts, I didn't make any comments, I didn't say anything, because for me, I've seen things. It's easy to jump on the bandwagon, isn't it? It's easy to like to take part when everyone's involved, when it's because it's, for a lot of people now, it's an easier time to speak out. So more people are going to be speaking out and whatnot. But I just felt like, okay, I'm just going to just see what happens. I'm going to see if things change in this area, in that area. I'm just going to let time just take its course. But like yourself, Erica, there's also that feeling as well of like, when is this all going to end? You know, like, you know, there's lots of stuff coming up. You know, we're in a recession now, and I feel like everyone's attention is just, there's going to be a moment where everyone's attention is just going to go on to the next global crisis. And then they're going to forget about this. But I would say one thing that's really surprised me is, I mean, obviously I know, like, I was actually, just before coming on this, I was reading like the tweets about Aunt Jemima maple syrup, and I heard something about Uncle Ben's as well. They're going to change his, and I was just and of course there are all these changes in the US, but this one horrific event, the impact that it's had, like here in the UK and just in other parts of Europe, has just been astounding. Like, I can't believe like the impact that it's had in terms of organizations that you wouldn't even imagine would even pay attention to this kind of stuff. are coming out with figures, and we're not even talking about just police brutality, we're talking about racism, systemic racism, institutional racism. So there are now organizations that are coming forward with their figures, you know, of how many black staff they have in certain positions and certain levels, people putting money into kind of like black businesses or community projects, you know, people speaking out, companies speaking out against racism, you know. And then we've had this thing, and I'm sure it's been the case in the States, where, you know, a lot of places were like posting their black tiles and then they started to get called out. Now, this was a big thing with galleries in particular in the UK, where they would say, right, we're in solidarity, you know, we don't accept racism, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you have places like the British Museum, which goodness knows how many artifacts they have stolen, you know, looted from, you know, from African countries, saying, oh, we're standing in solidarity. All of these organizations, and then staff and former staff or artists, you know, would call them out publicly. So it was opening this brand new conversation. Okay, things really do need to change. Like, there's a lot of problems here in this industry that people think is so progressive. It's a lot less progressive than it makes itself out to be. And then, yeah, just the type of businesses and company, like what I would do is I would just like randomly search like a company, and just see, okay, what are they saying about it? And they've posted the black square, and you go on the homepage on their website, and there's a statement, and there's links to charities and foundations. And yeah, it just feels like I'm in a different world. Like, it's something that I never would have imagined. And just like statues being taken down, and there's this whole conversation of like removing statues of slave owners. And yeah, it's weird. And it's like, there's this momentum, but it's like, how long is it gonna continue? Like, obviously, if all of this kind of like bandwagoning, if it is bandwagoning, or this momentum, if it does end, it's like, at the end of the day, for us who are black, we're still going to be black, right, at the end of the day. And it's like, how will racism still be there? Is there, like, I mean, I get what you mean, like, things aren't going to happen overnight. It's something that's going to take a long time, but it'll be interesting to see like what progress is made, like even before the end of the year, and you know, who sticks to their word and who doesn't. Because like, we've seen it so many times before. You know, I've been on protests and whatnot, and I mean, I'll be honest, there was a Black Lives Matter protest in my city. I didn't go to it because I think a part of me had lost kind of faith in protesting, and but kind of just seeing the impact that the protests in the States have had, though, I can see that already something's happening. But yeah, it just felt like just being in a different world.
Yeah.
I think it's easier also to see like there's a change maybe under like the blanket of whiteness, but then I think since I'm kind of witnessing folks in a really smaller town vibe, that there's no just like look, like turning the mirror on themselves, like, and that's really where we're gonna see more impact and change, I think. I mean, all of those points that you brought up are, you know, reassuring, and there's hopeful moments in there, but I think for folks that just feel like this isn't part of their world, that's where we're gonna have the delay.
Yeah.
You know, and there is no momentum built up in those areas yet. You know, they haven't even tried to go there yet, you know.
Right.
I have some, I've been a part of these before, Genevieve, and I'm just really thankful for you guys for putting this follow-up together. I just wanted to follow up too. It's been really interesting with this time as a white woman to see what's been happening, and specifically, I remember when the black squares were being posted, both my husband and I were very like afraid of what that meant at first in regards to how it could stop the movement. I grew up in a very activist household and was very much drilled into my mind that like silence is violence, like being quiet is not a way to support. And so that also kind of freaked me out, that it was like this way for white people to like say they were supporting while actually just being silent. And it was like, I was kind of concerned about the message, and we were kind of like, oh no, are people just going to post this and disappear? Because of course it was all about the momentum. And I think one of the things that I was more pleasantly surprised by and made me a little bit hopeful was, for the first time, I felt like instead of that movement of all these kind of squares that were posted actually just shutting it down, it almost became a teaching opportunity for people to talk about that in a way that it hadn't in the past, because so many times in the past these things have popped up and everyone's like, I support, and then disappear. And you know, people that I know and friends and people who are like, yes, I agree with all this, but like now I'm busy and back to my life. You know, all of a sudden people were being held accountable. And because that became the public discourse around the message of the Black squares, it actually turned into this learning opportunity, I think also for many white people, about not losing the momentum. And I know it's still early in the days after that, and there's a long way to go, but I've been very tentatively hopeful, cautiously optimistic about the fact that people that I know who have never really thought about this stuff before have not only been talking about it, but having conversations. And I've been having phone calls, and we've been having calls with friends, and every weekly chat that we have with family or cousins, or standing calls with my husband and his guy friends, or me and my female friends across the country. It hasn't just been a news topic, it's been something that people have been talking about in a way that I've never heard before, which is really deeply self-reflective. And for myself, it's interesting because I grew up in a family that was, my parents were like, I felt like as kids, my sister and I were at every rally and protest for anything you can imagine, whether it was feminism, LGBTQ rights back in the day, income inequality, rights, equality, Black and brown people, police brutality. And I think that for me then, when I left the house, it was like that for me almost made me feel like, because I had grown up like this, that like I had done my part, and when I was on my own, I hadn't, carried that mantle on with me. And so this time has been really important for me as well, to just continuously reflect that it's not enough to know that I agree with these things. It's not enough to be involved with voting and to do that, but I also need to be able to speak about it, and in particular to bring my fellow white friends on board to say, we can't stop. It's not enough that you think you're a good person and that you don't mean any harm, and even that you vote for things that might help this. We need to talk about it, and we need to not stop. And I'm seeing a shift. I'm in like a funk this week, so it's hard to be hopeful, but I do have to say I've been seeing these things that some of you all have mentioned before too. And I do think it is the responsibility now at this point is really on us white people to not drop the ball and just be a disappointment again, because that's 100% true. As Erica and Genevieve, and you're saying, like, we've been a disappointment in the past for saying we know what's right and then not following through on it. And I think that that's where it's time for us to really step up. So I hope that we can.
Thanks, Mika.
Yeah, thank you.
We all have kind of I think a lot of this too, you feel that you need to step out of what you know in order to address it. But I wonder how much we do within what we do to address it, because for me, I feel like, okay, I have to go out and do this and that. And then I realize that what I do can be a vehicle, right? I think I've mentioned this, that having Genevieve here is very purposeful, very intentional. her work, this has always dealt with these things because these things have always existed. So this is nothing new. So I feel, you know, really, really good about that. But I feel like a lot of times we lose sight of the fact, and people have said it over and over here, these conversations, like it is about having conversations, and the conversations need to be uncomfortable. And I wonder, I ask folks that are here, you know, people alluded to this, to me, you know, it's that feeling of when you were in a room and you heard something that was not appropriate. Did you say something? And I'll say, I can say as a person of color, I've not said things, but that's a bit of self-preservation. I have to figure out within a certain amount of time what the consequence of what I say is going to be, you know? And so, but when you're, you know, because I feel as though, and I've shared with Genevieve, I feel as though past couple of weeks, I've challenged some people to do some things and I've been disappointed. You know, I've been disappointed, and I never get over that disappointment. And I set these, you know, but I feel very inspired by what's going on. So I continue to ask and I continue to challenge people. But there's a certain threshold we all have with the amount of discomfort that comes along with these conversations. And I think that's where it really takes a lot of us to think about, you know, to what point are you willing to be uncomfortable? If you consider me your friend, would you let someone talk about me if I weren't there, or somebody, you know, I mean, it's very simple. I think it goes back to children. That's not cool. Don't do that. It's not okay. But we have to calculate often when we're in a room, whether we're of color or not, what the consequence is. And I think there's a certain amount of fear that comes with that. And I wonder, you know, when you think about that, am I the only one who, because I always feel like I just need to kind of, you know, you need to read the room. You need to understand it's not that easy. But there's a real desire to want to be able to do that. But that requires you to be okay with what happens. I mean, you see it all the time on, yes, I do go on TikTok, but you see it all the time when people are like, you know, I lost how many followers because I put, you know, I said Black Lives Matter. Okay, that, I'm sure that was hurtful, but that's not a direct, you know, but I mean, if you were in a room and you said something, would you be okay if somebody was like, yeah, I don't agree with that. Yeah, they don't matter to me. Would you, you know what I mean? I think that's where we all are, that this is, you know, this is it's like a moment of truth right now. And that's, I think, what I'm wondering when I talk with my colleagues, you know, within art organizations, we're all ready to go. But of course, the people I'm talking to are the people that were already ready to go beforehand. How do we look within our organizations in spaces where we know that it's not quite ready, but we have to do something? How do we create that sustaining impact that all of this is created? And there's been this conversation that I've had with people that either it's a group approach, like an institution has to create policy and make folks do it, or we have to look at ourselves individually and decide. I don't know who it was who said, like, decide. Either I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to do this, or I'm not, and that's a decision. And you're okay with that, because not everybody is going to be on board. But I personally would rather know whether this person was on board or not. That's just me. Does anybody have, you know, thoughts about that when we talk about what it really means to create anti-racism as an institution itself? I mean, where we start or how we start?
There goes the momentum. I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
I want to talk about something that sort of feels like this, but it's just a kind of experience I've been having here in this small predominantly white town. I like needed a symbol. I needed a sign that this was a safe space, that this was an open space, that there were some form of allies in this area when it comes to racism. Because I have this ability to kind of gauge who isn't, so I wanted to know who was. So I spent my own money when I should have probably spent it on, you know, fundraisers and whatnot, which I've also been doing. But I bought a bunch of Black Lives Matter signs, and I approached people saying, like, you know, I have these signs, you don't have to pay for them. I just want, like, if you're into this, like, please put this out. And I was doing it for a very, like, selfish reason, like, just really for me, because I knew it wasn't really going to affect anyone else, or like that's how I perceived it, you know. And like I had a handful of my friends that I've known for a long time that were like, yeah, definitely, I'll put one up. And then, you know, I had some people that were just like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with this. And I was just like, well, why don't you feel comfortable? You know, like, kind of giving them an opportunity to speak about how they're feeling. And one comment was just like, I'm afraid someone's might throw a rock through my window. And I'm just like, so you're gonna avoid something that kind of has been something that Black folks have had to suffer through. And this is just a sign, like, this isn't even like beyond, just letting folks know that you are down for this, you know, and you believe in it. And then I had another person that was like, who messaged me and was like, yes, I would love a sign. Can you drop it off for me? And I was like, awesome, great. I dropped it off. And later that evening, I get a message from her saying, you know, I'm really sorry, but I never actually talked to my husband about this. And he was upset when he came home and saw the sign. And I just felt so deflated, because it's like, I knew that was going to happen at some point, and I was just waiting for those people that were going to not be the people that could do it, you know? And I was fearful of that. And that was kind of a bit of me, like, facing the privileged side of me. And like, I could have just gone about my day and just been like, oh, it's not really a thing here, I don't have to think about it in the same way. Mm-hmm. But the way, like, just the emptiness I felt from that message of her saying that she couldn't put it up was just gut-wrenching. And the story is sort of hopeful. Like, a few days later, she was like, you know what, we've been talking and we have decided to put the sign out, so just letting you know. Like, so there are, like, conversations that have to be had like in a household. Like, it has to start super small, you know, just within each household, to kind of, I don't know, really get a grip on the bigger picture. And like, that little move of me, like, asking people to put signs out is really just a blip. But yeah, it's challenging because I have more that, you know, it's like, I'm like, do I just want to feel shitty today because I don't want to, like, hear who's, you know, to my face in a way, you know. Yeah. I can't handle the shift, or like the uncomfortableness of what your racist friends that are really nice people but they're racist are gonna say, you know.
It's very, yeah, the feeling of like the superficial relationships you have, you know, that there's a possibility it can go a different direction, but it doesn't hurt any less, even though you know it. Kat wanted to say something. Hi, Kat.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Kat.
So, hi. So I'm a little nervous about speaking up, so I'm not much of a public speaker. Sorry in advance if I'm not, like, looking at you. But so I run a website, a Harry Potter website. So if anybody knows what's sort of happening in the Harry Potter world right now with the whole J.K. Rowling stuff, you'll know that I'm sort of living in this weird cross section of all of these, like, two movements that are crashing together sort of at full speed, with Black Lives Matter and Trans Lives Matter. And so our entire organization is sort of going through this whole, like, upheaval of everything of how we operated and who we are and what we look like and what we represent to the world. And I would just say, as like a white cis woman, it's becoming difficult to see where the line is, where what's performative and what is like a genuine action that people are going to take and accept and say, okay, I see that you're trying and we appreciate that, like keep doing that. And I'm just confessing, I guess, that I'm finding that it's hard to find that line between being really genuine and, you know, because we all do want to do better and we all want to try and put the effort out there, but feeling, you know, feeling like what you're doing isn't enough, or it's too much and then it's performative, it's just something that I never had thought about before. And so I'm learning a lot, I guess is what I'm saying. I'm learning a lot, and I'm having a lot of these conversations and attending a lot of these calls, and I love things like this. So I just thank you. And I know that it sucks that you have to teach us anything at all, but you know, we're trying. I am anyway.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I guess I would say, you know, you might not always be able to get that pat on the back or that thumbs up, you know? But
yeah, and I mean, we're not necessarily looking for that, but I do, you know, we don't deserve it, and we don't, you know, we're not asking for it. It's just hard to know when you're doing enough. And I guess as long as you're trying and learning and listening, and that's all there is, right? So
yeah, and I think, sorry, maybe I'm being a little intense right now. I know, Kat, so
you're not, it's okay.
But I just want to be like, if you're wondering if you're doing enough, then you aren't. Do you know? And I know that's kind of, and I say that from a place where I know who you are, and I know, you know, that you're going to make an effort. But like, if you have to question if you're doing enough, then you probably should do more.
Got it. Okay.
I wanted to share with you a story. My husband was telling me about one of his coworkers who's African American, and it was in Northampton, and there was a protest, like a march going on. And so he's walking down the street, and the Black Lives Matter, folks are coming down, and literally like made no eye contact with him, didn't even acknowledge that he was there, and just like they were on their mission. And I think I share that with you because for obvious reasons, but I think a lot of this is being present about what you're really doing. The idea of right at this moment, that it isn't this concept or idea, it is what you do. So I think to Genevieve's point, it's kind of like what you do. If you can feel it and you see whatever the conversation or the action happening, then you're in it. But if you're just part of the movement, I don't know if that's necessarily will give you the sort of feeling that you think that you're having. You know what I mean? That's why I think for us here, it's about these conversations where you actually have to interact and have these difficult moments that makes the difference. That's what you go back and have that conversation with other people in your circle that might make it somewhat uncomfortable, but a really direct, discussion about what is wrong, because that seemed really empty to him. He's like, you're not even going to acknowledge, you're talking about my life matters and you're just going to mow me down on the sidewalk. I'm not, I'm more than just an idea. And I think in the same respect, sometimes the idea of what is, or the perception or the idea of what a Black person is, or a Black male, that's kind of those are some of the images beyond what we actually see that create this disconnect of who these people really are, what my child is really like and going to be as an adult, and who you think he's going to be because of these images or ideas or myths that you have, in your head. And I know it seems really elementary and but if it's one, if it's the idea of like, how many Black folks do you know? Like, how many of you, like, how many have you actually spoken to, or had a conversation with, or besides being, you know, co-workers, and to the credit of small communities that are predominantly white, I mean, you're not going to see a lot of us here. You've never had to really engage or so you, like I said, I mean, I've said it over and over. I do not at all, and I don't think any of us do. There is nothing that makes me blame white people for what they have inherited. But there is an accountability and responsibility for the choices you make given what you were born into. That's it. That's all that it is. There's nothing that we can change or, you know, but I think it's that, and it's that understanding or that interaction that makes the difference in how, I would say, Kat, that you feel when you think about what you're doing, that it's not an idea or a campaign, that it's this actual, you know, what am I doing, or what do I think, or what are instances where I can say something or do something differently that might make the difference for you.
I've definitely been thinking about that a lot, because I mean, I do, you know, I live in Greenfield for reference. So like, I'm also in a predominantly white area, but because I do work in a, you know, a global community, I do interact with all sorts of people all the time. And so even through all of this, I never thought of myself as like a racist person. I always said I'm an ally to everybody. I'd be the best person I can possibly be. But then I read all these things, and, you know, like we talked about Aunt Jemima and like Uncle Ben, and even I learned the other day about the origins of the ice cream truck song. And there's just all these things that I never even would begin to think about. And it's just, I feel like I've been living in the dark, even though I've felt like I've been doing as much as I possibly could. It's clearly I was not. And it's just eye-opening, and I have a lot of white guilt about it, but I'm living with it and I'm learning to push through. So I'm trying.
We'll help you.
And I have one thing too, Kat, for something that has really helped me, because I think in the beginning of a lot of these things, there's this sense of, and maybe particular to white people too, who like to like be like, what can I do to solve this? Like, give me like a list of 5 things I can check off, and now great, it's done. Or I'm no longer racist because I did these 5 things that I was told to do and read some books and had a conversation. But I think as I realized, you know, this needs to be a part of the rest of my life forever, every day. This isn't like a thing that's going to be solved. And then at first that feels really overwhelming and daunting, but then also there's this level that it feels a little bit freeing too, because you realize like, I'm going to fuck up, and like, I'm going to make mistakes, and what I know today, I'm going to do the best with what I can, but maybe I'll say something or do something and someone will say, actually, like, this, you know, you could be done in this way, or that wasn't as helpful as maybe what you thought. And as long as we don't say, well, I tried and no one wants my help anyways, which like you see a lot of that, like, you know, someone does one thing and then they were like gently told that maybe that wasn't the most helpful, or maybe it was actually like counterproductive. And they're like, well, if you just want to push me away and not want my help, it's like, I realized being able to constantly every day for the rest of my life, being willing to say, you know, course correct, like every time. And as long as the direction is forward and I'm willing to show up every day, that's the work. And so I think it kind of alleviates some of that, like, have I done enough? Am I doing enough? I think the consistency will tell, and that's the key, because there's never going to be a day when it's like, yes,
Enough.
you've done enough. It's simply, and this is again the kind of thing that we're going to have to keep proving. Like, nothing we say today is going to convince any, you know, anyone in the Black and brown community that white people are on board for good. It's going to be shown if we're still on board 10 years from now and things are changing, and 20 years from now and 30, that's when it's going to be proved. There's nothing, it's not, you know, like convincing anyone of that today doesn't even make any sense because there's no trust there. So the way to build that is just the consistent little actions. And so me reminding myself that too has helped. So maybe that.
Thank you. It's a very good point.
The one thing, I'm wondering is, when we talk about all of this, there's a lot of, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of fear around all of this, fear of exclusion, fear of being criticized, fear of, no change. And honestly, just like fear of one another in a lot of ways. And I wonder to what extent any one of you kind of, I don't know, kind of places that, like, is it I don't know, if it impacts you enough to kind of, that's what navigates you sometimes. And I don't mean to put that negatively, but I think sometimes we don't share with one another what our fear is, that you're afraid of, of losing friends, of insulting someone if you say something, of, being perceived as, I use this example a lot, but I think some people on this call will probably realize that the way that you're perceived as a Black woman, sometimes when I get really passionate, I have to check myself because I don't want people to think I'm angry, but I'm just being really passionate. But there's like an immediate association sometimes. And that is that's a fear for me. Like, that's how I navigate. I don't think that may not always be the case, and that's not necessarily fair, but there are things that that prevent us from doing things because we're afraid of blank.
I can kind of jump into that one, and I think it relates to with what Genevieve was saying, that I'm originally from California, Southern California, and I kind of had that close group of friends that were more diverse. And moving out here, I already knew that it was going to be a smaller town and what the demographics were. But I came in thinking, I don't know if I'm happy in the sense that I had this mentality, because I think that it gave me hope, where I thought, it doesn't matter if everyone here is white, I'm just another person joining. And that was the hope and the mentality that I wanted to come in with. And I did, for the most part, because I thought, well, I didn't also want to come in with the opposite, thinking like, I'm Mexican and I'm brown, and like, is this okay? But at the same time too, I have noticed, like, sorry, I have noticed that I have made the mental note of, if I hear someone and they are talking about the protest and I overhear, what are they doing? It's not worth it. There's bigger things at play. There's more important things to play. Or seeing Confederate flags hanging from houses, then I think, oh gosh, that's a street where I don't want to walk down. That's a house, or that's a group of people that I need to memorize their face so that I know that that is probably not safe. And that's come from me just being brown. I'm not Black. And I see that there's even there's a different level there, but I can feel it. And so there is that navigation too, of thinking, let me memorize where certain things are, so that I know, so that I feel a bit more safe. And no one should really have to do that. No one at all should have to do that. But I feel it, and I can also speak too to I've questioned myself about having the sign out in front of the apartment. I saw an arrest yesterday that happened on the street where I lived, but the gentleman was not of color. And someone made a comment to the officers who had responded, with everything going on, thank you for your service. And I didn't know how to interpret it. are they simply saying thank you for still continuing to help us, but I didn't see what happened and why this person was being arrested? Or did it have kind of an implication of something else? And I didn't know how to navigate that. But then again, it went into my head of okay, now how do I navigate this? How much can I say and how much can I not say? Because how much turns into just losing someone as a contact versus being a threat in a sense. So it's hard to navigate all of that, but I'm happy that in a sense that it's happening, because I feel that if it wasn't, then I wouldn't know and I wouldn't be able to learn either. And kind of in more of a positive note, I am extremely grateful right now to be in a position where I'm working with Erica and I'm working with Genevieve, and I feel like I'm in the sweet spot. This is where I get to learn. This is where I get to help and be a part of this. Whereas, like we were saying with other institutions, and places that I've worked, I can think about the places I've worked, and I know that if I was there, there would be no mention of this. It would be the simple, we stand in solidarity, but then nothing would happen, or no conversations, nothing that would actually push forward with anything. And then you wonder, okay, do you say something, and how do you say it so that it's actually received and they do something, versus just being offended and saying, get out of here? And so I'm grateful in that sense too, that I get to be here and I get to work with people who are actually a part of this and want to keep pushing forward. And it feels it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be a part of that. And even something simple that I think I told Erica as well was, growing up with magazines around, I never really saw anyone that was not white. It was just everyone was very pale complexion and white, and I had internalized that too as, okay, that's what is the ideal, or that is what it is. And I had never actually seen an ebony magazine before. And when I had gone seeing all the magazines that Genevieve have, I was so taken aback, and I was just in my head thinking, these are beautiful. This is amazing. And there's a sadness of thinking, why didn't I ever see this? Why wasn't this in the stores that I walked to, in the places that I went to? Why wasn't that there? Why didn't I get to see this? But at the same time too, there's a gratitude of thinking like, well, at least I get to see it now. And it's amazing. And I'm happy to see it now. And it's a combination of feeling, like Erica was saying, of grief and anger and these different mix of emotions, but also wanting to hold on to the little steps that seem like they are progress. And I just hope that continues as well too. But I'm also glad too to see everyone that showed up for this, because I'm sure that you knew coming into it was going to be a difficult conversation, and there's going to be moments where you're not sure what you can say or what you can't say, but I'm happy that you still showed up and that you're here. So thank you. Sorry.
Okay, she made me cry. I'm really happy. I think I've had the fortune of working with Genevieve and Veronica and Erin, and but I think that goes to the fact that you do have to have, there needs to be some sort of understanding that there is a support system in place. And that's not always the case, but you can't let that deter you. And I think that, again, I think that all of what we've done and where we are, it's very purposeful and it's very intentional. Because if we lose sight of what can be, I think that creates a paralysis. And we just don't have time for that. Black folks don't have time for that. We just can't do that. It's never been the way. I think everybody has probably seen the sentiment all over. It is astounding to me when you look historically at just how resilient Black and brown folks have been, and there has not been a rebellion. It is always about moving forward. And I don't think that will change, but I think that we are at a place now where we do need to think really critically about how we sustain that, and that we understand and accept that it will be uncomfortable, not just for a window of time, but it will continually be uncomfortable, because for certain groups of people, it has always been uncomfortable. Yet you find a way to cope and to navigate. But you know, that can only be sustained for so long. And I think that that's where we are. You know, I feel like the past couple of weeks, it really struck me how difficult all of this is. And I remember reading a quote of somebody, and I don't know, maybe other people have said this, but to me, myself, and until I had these conversations with Veronica and Genevieve, like to a certain degree, like Black folks can often let themselves be lulled to sleep because it just feels better that way. Like, you know what, we're okay right now. Like, this is fine. And then boom, uh-oh, like I fell asleep on the job. I can't believe I didn't pay attention. Look at what's happening. I need to, you know, and then there is a certain amount of trauma that I think that we are predisposed to feeling each time this happens. So I think we all have roles to play, but they are very different. And we cannot place unreasonable expectations if we actually want to get to where we want to get. And that does require a certain amount of pain that comes with, oh, wow, I thought that person was going to say yes when I asked them to do that. Or I thought that person felt differently about that. But you can't stop doing what you're doing, even though that happens. And I always like to think that there are certain people, I get worried right now that if we push too hard, there are certain people who are on the fence who will say, I think as Micah had said, like, they'll just be like, forget it, I can't do this, it's too much. And we need to make sure that we don't do that. It's a real delicate balance. But you know, I always feel optimistic.
And I thank you for creating this space. I mean, I think you and Veronica and I have kind of, what?
Don't make me cry again.
No, I just was thinking, like, you know, as a small step, the folks that have shown up for the, you know, the past 3 talks and this one, there was that sense of community. It kind of felt like a safe space. And I think if we just keep that channel open, if anyone's feeling like they need to, you know, hop on a Zoom call, like if we can kind of show up for each other, I'm willing to do that. So.
Me too. Yeah. I was going to say, as we kind of wrap up, that what are things that people are doing or need that we can support each other with, or you know, help one another with? And if it is as simple as bringing us back together, we can do that. But I think we also have to remember that it's okay to ask for help. Like, it took me a long time to grasp that it's okay to ask for help.
I just wanted to say a few things. I know it's towards the end. This is apparently usually my way I wait. I'm a waiter, but I am really thankful for the space for us to kind of talk and have this dialogue. I am, you know, I think in some of the conversations I've had with Erica and Genevieve offline, I think y'all are pretty aware that I've done some political work for a long time and have participated in a variety of struggles off and on for the last 12 years. And I think a few things to remind yourselves in this moment is that a lot of the examples that you all are giving, Genevieve talking about handing out yard signs, Erica asking the big questions about, like, well, how do we root out anti-Blackness in these large institutions that we're a part of, are all important questions. And I think that they are not necessarily answerable in the space and capacity of a Zoom call, right? But I do think that they're questions that we need to keep open, because I will say that certainly we've seen these sorts of repetitions of Black violent death, even as far away as 4 years ago with Trayvon's murder and the subsequent kind of emergence of Black Lives Matter as we understand it. You know, in the early 2000s, we had Jenna 6 with the kind of threat of noosing and things like that. And so there's been this kind of you know, the death of Oscar Grant in the earlier late 2000s. Like there's been these repetitions of these kinds of deaths, but each one of them did something different each time. And I will say this one, in my experience and histories of these things, feels qualitatively different. And what I mean by that is that there's a kind of, everybody's all hands in, it seems, right? And it's, everyone feels a kind of ethical call to do something in this moment. And I think that in each way, and not to let folks off the hook, right? But at the same time, I think everyone in some kind of way, what produces a movement is everyone has a job, right? And we all are going to be doing different things. And I just want to reiterate that because Erica's been saying this, but I think there's things we can all do large and small to sort of keep this momentum going. And certainly there's going to be repression. I mean, you know, the folks, a lot of the activists in Ferguson died under mysterious reasons, right? So I think that we have to also think about the long-term effects of these kinds of social movements. But also keep in mind that none of us can be comfortable. I mean, I'm a Black woman and have nieces and nephews and don't have children, but I constantly am having phone calls with my nieces and nephews about being safe when they leave the home, and certainly got the talk, and the talk of being Black is having to talk of what it means to talk to a police officer, keeping your hands on the steering wheel, saying yes, no, no, sir, and hoping to God you get out of that interaction safe and alive, right? So these things aren't new, but I just think, what can you do in your own, you know, what is my position in society? What kind of access to resources and power do I have? And what does that look like? What can I do? And that's a question that folks who are not Black on this call probably need to ask themselves every single day you wake up in the morning. You know, whether it be donating your money, donating your time, building resources for your Black coworkers at work to be more comfortable so you're not constantly paranoid. Understanding the importance, I'm an academic and a scholar, understanding the importance of Black culture, politics, and art beyond just the sort of spaces we're given, and understanding how that produces sort of unique and universal experiences to understand difference and otherness. So really, like, that constantly questioning yourself, what resources, what access, what position do I have, and what can I do today? And it's not even about what you did yesterday. I think one of the most important understandings is anti-Blackness and anti-racism isn't a state of being. You can't achieve nirvana. It's not like some sort of ultimate unlocking the big boss on a video game or something and you've won and you get to kind of rest on your laurels. It is an everyday, not, you know, repetitive practice. And I think that there's something to be said in the kind of work that requires. So I hope that, as much as I've been also crying and grieving, I think there's a kind of peculiar and strange joy I'm getting out of this moment, because so many folks are activated. And as much as I'm distrustful of corporations making these statements, there is something interesting to see the tension between the state, you know, and these agencies protecting police and these kind of violent murders that are happening. And then you have corporations and economy kind of coming out against these things. While we can't trust them because I don't think they actually have our best interest in mind, it is telling us that this is a really serious moment. And even these multinational conglomerates are having to contend with what's happening in the streets. Mm-hmm. And it gives us a really great litmus test for how we're all doing. So I don't know, I just wanted to kind of share some thoughts about these repetitions of these kind of moments and how they've all changed things, you know, in small ways. But this moment, for some reason, having everything to do with COVID, everything to do with all of us being on Zoom right now, is actually making a massive amount of transformation and change. And so hopefully we'll be able to keep it going if we all continue asking ourselves questions every day about what we can do.
Well put. If all of you don't know what Dr. Sharon Jordan is talking about or what she's doing, this woman is amazing. She is just, right? Am I right? Erin, Veronica, Genevieve, she is like, just look her up. And come back on July 1st because she's going to talk with Genevieve and use her work to deconstruct and explain, and she and Genevieve are going to talk about it. And there are so many things that Dr. Jordan is doing that we all need to know about. But it is these sorts of voices. I was going to say, I think one of the things too that is a very high point is that we have people like Dr. Jordan and Genevieve and Veronica and all these people who are now in places that make the sort of impact we wish we had to bring the voices forward that we wish we would have had in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, there is a transformation. We see it in the art world. There's still challenges, but we need to really celebrate that we have these people in these institutions that, quite frankly, weren't prepared for us to participate. And that is a lot of it too. I think we are making up the rules and the way that we do this as we go, and we all need to acknowledge that and be patient about that. But I think that we can celebrate that we have these voices to actually share. And I think, as someone said, that to give us an opportunity to have these learning moments, that there is a voice at Hyperallergic or wherever it is that tells us, you know what, this is not okay. We can't just not talk about this, and it's somebody who represents the voice. It's not somebody who is translating it for us. And I think that's a really important part of all of this that we need to acknowledge, and we need to support and encourage. And that is why it's so important to share the work they're doing and create this for our children. These are the exemplars I've been waiting for.
I might be going off topic here slightly, but
Please.
I wanted to ask, like, how have you found there to be a difference in the way that the art world in particular is kind of, or maybe certain people in the art world who didn't give attention to your work? Have you noticed like a new influx of like attention and followers on social media, like more interest in your work, like with regards to everything that's been happening? Or
I don't notice anything drastic. It's kind of I feel like I haven't been as active on social media, so I haven't followed it as much. But it's not, sometimes something will be written, which something just got written about my work. So maybe there will be a new interest, or folks that can enter it in a different way or use it as a tool. So they might be reaching out for that. But honestly, you know, a few new random people following a day is kind of what the pace kind of seems like. So I think it's, you know, a lot of it is just waiting for folks to catch up. So it's not to say that it won't happen, or that, you know, I'm just hopeful that my work can be used as a tool to, you know, bridge these conversations and give people perspective through a visual if they don't quite have the words, I guess. Is that making sense?
yeah, no, the reason why I asked the question is because you know, I've had conversations with like other artists and in some cases curators as well, who've spoken about like just gaining like an influx of like new followers on social media. Yeah. You know, certain publications who weren't giving attention to Black artists before are now, like, I think them approaching artists to like to interview them and kind of highlight the work that they do. You know,
a lot
people
of my friends are experiencing that, in the sense of like, if someone posted about, you know, I think it's that like chain reaction, and it's a little bit of like people just trying to be, oh, this is what we should do kind of thing. But I think, you know, on a positive note, like people are paying attention, people are getting attention that might otherwise wouldn't have, you know. So that's really exciting, and I don't think I fall under that bubble of Black artists to follow, in the sense of, you know, my skin privilege. So I'm not really trying to stand out or take away from anyone else's spotlight, you know.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of new conversations, or at least the way in which conversations are going to be approached, probably with a lot of African American artists. You know, again, I think a lot, there's probably a little bit of caution with that. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how the conversations might change from how they used to be in the past. And the questions that are asked of artists of color, particularly, you know, African American artists. But, you know, I think the goal is still the same. I think the recognition and the acknowledgement has to exist, and then the voice is given. But I think what's always going to be most important is the documentation that goes along with that. Because we have to have something to reference. And I think in the past, we haven't always had that. So hopefully that will make a huge difference, or that's something that will change too. I'd love to see that.
Am I supposed to talk about the exhibition?
Oh yeah, that's right. Hey everybody, Genevieve's got an announcement.
It's a smaller group and there'll be more information online, but I'm putting together, with the help of Erica and Veronica, a virtual exhibition. The theme is kind of based off of a work that I created called We Are More Than a Moment. And so I wanted to give folks an opportunity to submit work and kind of create based off of like partially this community we've built, and possibly like getting your work shown with folks that otherwise you might not be able to. And so, you know, this idea of we are more than a moment, a call to be heard, and I just want to set up a platform for your voices to be heard. So there'll be more information on my page and the gallery's page, but yeah.
Genevieve's being really modest. Yeah, so Genevieve's going to curate this and select the works, and then we'll put it on a virtual exhibition platform, and the show will open in August. So I think August 5th. So yeah, if you go to our website, and Veronica, I guess we could share the link maybe through chat of where to go, but we definitely encourage you to participate, and all of the guidelines and information are online. But this is a really neat opportunity, and I think it's just another way that we get to capitalize on Genevieve's residency here, and that we really, if there's one thing I have to say about this woman, is that she is exceptionally generous with her time. Like, she definitely wants to support other artists. So I really encourage everyone to take an opportunity, if you have at all any interest, and submit your work.
Tell your friends.
That's right. Don't be shy. To that end, we have a lot that we have rescheduled and reprogrammed in response to what's going on in our nation. And the programs that we have are all on our website, but our next one will be next Wednesday. We'll have a conversation about the work that Titus Kafar did for the Time magazine cover. And hopefully, again, we just want to really make sure that we use art as a vehicle for having these conversations and continuing these conversations about difficult, difficult subjects that will help us to move forward. But after that, we'll also have, we also plan on having a session that will be 51 minutes and 51 minutes and 14 seconds, yeah, 51 minutes, 14 seconds of Black protest music. And that will be live on Zoom on June 25th. And then we will move into July, and on July 1st, Dr. Jordan will be back with Genevieve, and we'll be discussing her work. And then we'll also be talking about the show that Genevieve opened right before we went into quarantine, that opened at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Santa Barbara with the curator, Alexandra Terry. And that will be 2 sessions, July 8th and 15th. So there's lots of things that we're doing. And again, you know, if it's about conversation and that's what you feel moves us forward, which is what we think moves us forward, hopefully you will join us for those. And we always look forward to seeing all of you. So again, I really appreciate everyone coming back. Obviously, thank you to Genevieve and Veronica and Erin and all my partners in crime. But I feel like I'm not deterred. I hope none of you are. We need to keep ourselves inspired, but I think that comes through support and coming together. So consider this a place where we can come together.
Can I just mention something? Sorry, I didn't mean something like that.
Go ahead.
No, you were just speaking about the playlist, the Black protest songs. I'll put the link in the chat. So I'm part of a collective, and one of the collective members is a DJ, and she created a Black Joy mix.
Oh, wonderful. Cool.
Really nice. So
yes,
I'll pop that in the chat in a few moments.
That would be great, and we can share that. I think that would be awesome. Yeah. So all of these, again, this conversation will live on our BCRC YouTube page. We'd love to share that as well. And again, do think about ways that we can support each other and help one another out. But I think what's most important is that, you know, as Dr. Jordan said, we stay vigilant every day, ask ourselves questions, and do what we need to, you know, do to move forward. So have a wonderful rest of the week. I need a Kleenex so I can blow my nose. Other than that, thank you so much, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Nishan, Veronica, Genevieve, Erin, President Verge, Kat, Mika, Jeff, Sasisu? All right, Lou, Lauren, and Chick. And any of the people that aren't on there, Crystal, Ian, all these people that have come back. Thank you so much for coming back. We really appreciate it. Everybody,
thank you, Erica.
well, thank you.